Hello.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome back to Dastan Geeky. We have a special episode today in which we have a special guest with us.
That's me.
Mr. Mochi, a cobbler from the Cobble Street.
Yes.
So, Mr. Mochi, let us introduce ourselves to you. I am the Master Saab and this is the Dr. Saab.
Good to meet you both.
Good to meet
And
you.
it's come to attention that for a long time in your life, you've been engaged in this in an activity which you were introduced when you were a young man.
Yes.
You were very shy talking about it, and you used to keep it a secret. But
Yes.
now
It was hidden.
you've decided to come out of the closet.
Absolutely.
So tell us about this.
Well, I remember reading an Archie comic book,
Yeah.
and in one of the ads there was a Dungeons and Dragons ad. I was like, "What is this?"
What is Dungeons and Dragons? Yes.
Yeah, I was like, I want more. I want more of this."
More
Yeah.
of Dungeons and more of Dragons.
Yes. And then I met Master Saab.
The Master Saab, the one who corrupts us all.
So, what is it that you learned when you met this Master Saab?
That there are more people that looked at the same Archie comic book and saw the same
came
ad.
across the same ad.
And we came together
And-
on Friday nights.
And what was this ad? What is this Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, we roll dice, we imagine dragons, we imagine ourselves to be elves, dwarves, and halflings, and other creatures of magical delight.
I know that a lot of our listeners have had a similar experience. And that similar experience is that they have actually come across Dungeons and Dragons in a TV show or in a
Yes.
cartoon. A lot of them talk
Community,
about. A lot of them talk of Dexter's Laboratory,
Uh-huh.
and they come across that. Community had an episode,
Yeah.
and now, especially now, a lot of people
Big
like
Bang.
Strange Things.
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things was amazing.
Stranger Things.
Yeah,
So
that
like,
was
whoa, what is this Dungeons and Dragons thing?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so even more people come to Master Saab now.
So, for all of you who do not know about this, Dungeons and Dragons is this role-playing game in which you have a piece of paper and a pencil and a bunch of dice.
Unlike a board game,
Yeah.
the main core substance of the game and the activity of the game happens in your mind. It's in the imagination.
It's very interesting because when something is in your mind, it's all alone and it's not real. But when you share it with other people, then more people can see it and therefore it becomes real.
Yeah, that's one of the concepts that I really like about is
Yeah.
that there are four people who are listening to the same story, but each and every one of them has this different imagination.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about a castle, your castle is blue in color. The castle that comes in my mind is gray,
Right.
and his castle is pink.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure a lot of people might be very confused right now. What are they talking about? Castles and mines and colors. So let me give them a quick basic primer, right? And then we take it from there.
Yeah.
So this is what happens. A bunch of people get together to play a game like they would any other game. But unlike Monopoly or Cluedo or Ludo or whatnot,
Yeah.
or even unlike a video game, and these days a lot of people are playing online with a bunch of other people. What happens with this is, first of all, it traditionally it's played face to face. It's a social activity like no other. The interaction that all the players have with each other is not really governed by options and rules. It's governed by your imagination.
I think one of the major components that you're forgetting about is that in other board games like Monopoly, Risk, or Ludo, it's players against players.
Yeah.
In this, it's like players together against a common enemy.
Dungeon Master,
Yeah.
And it's a collaboration more
Yeah.
than anything else. So what happens is this. So every player has a character that for the duration of the game, they role play. And by role play, I mean this is escapism. They put themselves in the shoes of those characters, and whatever decisions they make in terms of what would that character do. And thus a story unfolds. Now, obviously, if all the players are controlling their characters and the actions of their characters, there is something else that needs to control the environment around them. That is the game master, or specifically in the game of Dungeons and Dragons, referred to as a dungeon master. He pretty much builds the world around the players, and the world reacts to how the characters act. And the story just unfolds. And by the end of a session of Dungeons and Dragons, or any other role-playing game for that matter, you've just walked through, lived through experienced a fantasy novel or a movie or a TV series or a comic book or whatever.
Yeah. So it's basically the same premise. Heroes, they band together, they go to a dungeon to rescue a princess or kill a dragon to take its loot, and henceforth. So, Mr. Mochi,
Yes.
tell us about a memorable character that you might have created or been assigned to you. And
In
you
fact,
played.
tell us about the first character you created
Yeah,
and what was
sure.
your very first experience?
Oh my god, I don't remember my first character. I remember Dolphinus Icebright,
Yeah, what was he?
a centaur.
A centaur is the
Yeah.
creature who's like a half
Half
horse, half human.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I also had a Drogue character, which is a black, dark,
dark elf.
underground
Dark
dwelling,
elf.
dark elf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about a memorable character that you liked and some of his
Ah.
traits.
Well, I love so many. There was Lem,
Hmm.
the halfling who was a thief. My favorite actually would be the bard.
Yeah.
I love playing the bard. But that's more recent. In the past, I liked playing a magician, but it was very complicated in the Dungeon and Dragon 3rd edition rules. Because that was very complicated to finding out the spells and what the spell does, and then you needed the components, and then there was a will check, and there was a concentration check, and I was like, ah!
Okay, let's it's because you can imagine what the listeners are feeling right now since you were confused
I was
and
very
you were
confused.
So tell us about this Lem character. What is he? What was he?
He was a halfling. He had a flute.
Halflings are hobbits, like
yeah,
in Lord of the
hobbits,
Rings.
hairy feet, short little things, running around, playful, usually happy.
Yeah.
They don't really get depressed. And it was a really magical world. It was near a port. I remember there was a port, and there was this crazy queen, and it was really mysterious. And there was the DM was very cool. But we never figured out what that queen wanted to do, because then people left the country and the game just disintegrated. And
So yeah, that also happens, folks. That sometimes that's a risk you're willing to take.
Yeah.
So,
campaign. That was a
Campaign.
So just let some of our listeners know that what happens is if you get together for a session, you play the session. That doesn't necessarily mean the story ends in that session. The next week or whatever your however you meet up is, that story continues, and that continuation, that serialization in game terms, often known as a campaign.
Yeah.
So
And
your
then you-
characters continue and they develop.
And they level up.
Yeah,
That's the fun part.
and your actions from the very first game could have ramifications in the 20th game.
Yes.
It
true.
all depends on how well the dungeon master keeps his notes and
True.
how good of a memory he has.
Yeah.
And also how the players contribute, because over the years, one thing I've learned is that traditionally how people approached it is that the whole game is there and it works because of the game master, which is not really true. It really is a collaboration. It's the players' contribution and the game master's contributions and everybody's contributions that come together and make this story, which often turns quite epic and
I also remember
serialized.
in the fantasy world, the thing I liked the most about fantasy world was gods. Because that was like different from, superheroes, different from science fiction. In the fantasy world, it was all about these, you bring to a god, or the god is causing destruction, or, or you get a
Yeah,
weapon,
there are
which is a
many
+1
gods.
weapon from a god, blessed
Yeah.
from the gods. So,
So-
that part I liked a lot.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with you.
Strangely enough, I don't think you've ever played a cleric.
Yeah, that's true. I never played a cleric. Yeah.
So
Something
that's
that
that's
needs to
probably
happen.
something
Yeah.
that you should look into.
True.
So that's the mechanics of the games and how the games are played. Tell us how coming, like you play every week, right? You play every
Yes,
Sunday.
almost every week.
Okay. So tell me, how does this affect your life outside? Does it give you to vent out? Does it
Oh, yeah,
an
yeah.
opportunity to de-stress?
Yes.
Because
All
for
those
me,
things.
it's always like forgetting about the real
Yeah.
world for like a few hours,
True.
and it just refreshes you
Yeah.
up. What about you? Please
It's
tell
like,
us.
for example, if you're going to any social gathering, before you go, you have to dress appropriately. You have to know, you have to remember each one's names. Here, you just go dress as nerdy as you want or as dirty as you want. Show up, and everyone's doesn't give a shit about your name because you have your, fantasy character.
Nobody cares you're Mochi Man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm Mochi Man otherwise, but
Yeah.
so
So
that's the fun part. You just immediately enter a fantasy world where where if you have no charisma in real life, you just roll the dice for
You can roll the
charisma.
dice, yes.
And that's
you-
what it is. There's a bit of a wish fulfillment that happens in role-playing games in which you get to do things and be what you're not really in real life.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna speak for myself and say that it has helped me in it has helped build up my confidence. Like in real life now, I can talk to about 10,
Public
20
speaking.
people, public speaking and everything, and even like going up to a stranger to say hello or something like that, and it has given me a grasp of my verbal skills and everything. So that it has helped me a lot. Has anything similar
Yes,
to you?
similar. Well, I used to do a lot of theatre work, and that was dealing with this huge crowd, and I would get huge stage fright, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. I was like, I hate stage fright. So then I just stopped doing theatre after like a year of doing it, professionally, and then before that in other smaller settings. But over here, it's like theatre,
Yeah.
but there's no audience. There's no one who's bought a ticket, so you really have to, get their money's worth. If it's a bad game, it doesn't
It's
matter.
a bad
it's
game,
okay.
yeah.
It's still fun at the end of the day.
Right.
Because there are no winners, there are no losers. It's just an experience, and
Yeah.
that's more important and something to remember.
That is
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
It's interesting how that
Yeah,
affects this and that affects that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
as a master sahib,
yeah.
that's not very different from a game mastering a game, and
Right.
I think that the same happens over here. Certain skills
Yeah.
as a master sahib come through in the game mastering, and certain skills from game mastering come through in master sabbing.
So tell us, Master Sahib, since you always have been like one of the leading
Yes, most
dungeon
experienced.
masters of our group, the little time that you have played as a character, what has been your favorite character that you have played?
But my character has to be this paladin. A paladin, for those who don't know, they're knights, and they've been gifted with certain abilities and powers by the gods. And this particular paladin, which I played, whose name was Kessler Breklar, I would say he's definitely my favorite character, simply because of the amount of evolution and growth that this character went through. Even when I wasn't playing him, he was there as an NPC. Even when I was playing somebody else, the game master would still have him appear as a guest star. And his evolution from a young boy to being wanting to be a knight, squired under, I think, one of your characters for a while, then becoming a knight himself, becoming a paladin, forging friendships, getting old. At the age of 72, while fighting giants and protecting a city, having a heart attack and dying, his soul having been tainted earlier with certain acts of evil that he had done, though those weren't his fault. Devils using that as an excuse to take him to hell, and then his old friends who are alive coming and traveling into hell to rescue a soul, and it just it's like. It was a
Cool.
character I played for 7 years. So
Wow.
Yeah, that's like a
That's pretty
lifetime.
impressive,
That's
yeah.
that's a lifetime of that happening. So speaking of characters, like famous characters, I'm sure some of our readers, I think one of the characters that they would know of is this famous dark elf Drizzt Do'Urden, which is I think one of the faces of Dungeons and Dragons when they market it and everything. So if you have read about Drizzt and if you have played him in any video game, then that is what Dungeons and Dragons
Right.
is. So speaking of playing, Mr. Mochi, have you ever played any computer games? Did you play?
Yeah,
There was
yeah.
this famous one, Baldur's Gate and Icewind
Yeah, I
Dale.
played Baldur's Gate at Everwinter Nights.
Yeah,
That was brilliant.
Which one would you say like that you like the most?
Oh, difficult one. There was even one, Ultima. That
Yeah.
was a crazy one. too,
Right,
you know,
right, the
like,
Ultima
yeah,
series.
Yeah, and it was
those
weird, like,
these computer role playing games, by
Yeah.
the way, are literally based on the actual role playing games
Yeah.
tabletop.
Right.
So what difference did you see when you
Hmm.
played Baldur's Gate and you played a game set in Baldur's Gate in one of our
Yeah, I
role
mean,
playing games?
you've
Just,
played.
it was a bit slower on the computer.
Yeah.
That's basically one of the issues. And then you had to follow that linear path almost. Except for Neverwinter Nights, at least you could branch off. There was some smaller missions here and there,
Yeah.
but it was very limited still.
But what was one
Yeah.
of the biggest differences you'd find between a computer role playing game and pen and paper tabletop role playing game?
Just the
I think
more people around you and just
Yeah,
the
and-
freedom to go
yeah,
beyond.
I think I'll agree with his
Yeah.
the linearity of
Yeah.
the video game.
Mm.
But I think one of the things that I enjoy in these computer games is seeing characters that have always been in my mind, and some of the more iconic characters when they appear
Yeah.
on the screen,
Yeah.
and this.
I even did one of those books. You know, like you turn to this page. And
Yeah.
you turn to this,
Yes.
and you turn
I
to
think
that page.
was
That's how the school-
was that like the basic form of role playing back then?
Yeah, like
Well,
option
Choose
one,
choose
option
your own
two,
choose
you know.
your own adventures.
Yeah, choose your own adventure.
Oh
kind
no,
of
no!
thing.
When Dungeons and Dragons
They
first
came
came
out
out,
much before.
having been based on miniature wargaming, no, you weren't really restricted in your options. I mean, that
Yeah.
aspect of role-playing game in the sense that you can either take right or left or not go through the door, listen to the door. That was always there. That's
Yeah.
what That's how it started.
Wow. I remember reading a lot of choose your own adventures when I
Yeah,
was
I
a kid.
remember reading a lot of those.
That is before my introduction to
Yeah.
Dungeons and
I have
Dragons.
them in
and
my
all that.
library. Oh, and then the coolest thing, Lord of the Rings, the books. When I first discovered them, they had that the writing. What's it called? The ruins. right?
Dwarven, the
Yeah,
Dwarven
yeah.
ruins.
Oh, those like just mesmerized me. I was like so interested in that because before this, friends of mine in school, I think we were in class 5 or 6, and we liked making these little coded languages. And this was kind of similar, like you're learning another language in a sense. And that was mysterious, and I just really wanted to know everything about it. And then some friends were like, oh yeah, we read all the books and it's amazing, you have to get into it. So they read The Hobbit first. I was still a teenager. And back then, the world is a bit more magical, you know.
Yeah.
Now you grow up and then like, okay, yeah, seeing this, that stuff doesn't exist or whatever, but you still had hope, when you
Yeah.
So it's like, it was a lot more fun. I recommend reading those books at a younger age than reading it later.
Mm.
Maybe read it again later.
Yeah.
But that magic part of it just
That's
feels
true.
more magical when you're
That's
younger.
true.
It fuels your
Everything does,
imagination.
I think that's another
Yeah.
thing with modern contemporary fantasy. That's
Yeah.
one of the problems I have is that it's just become less about magic and more about
Shock.
plot twist,
and
shock
plot twist.
value,
Yeah.
being dark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
I mean, because think about it. In Lord of the Rings, one
Yeah.
of the saddest things that happened was when Gandalf dies in the Misty Mountains.
Mhm.
But
Not the Misty Mountains.
Misty Mountains.
In
Mines of Moria.
Mines
yeah.
of Moria.
Yeah.
So but he comes back in the second book.
Right.
I think that that was like when the movies came out.
Yeah.
That was that era's equivalency of the Game of Thrones readers versus watchers,
Yes.
in which people who had read Lord of the Rings were like,
Yeah.
"Don't be sad, man. Don't be sad. Things will liven up in the next movie." And like what happens now with Game of Thrones, in which wait, you get these Facebook statuses that wait till you see what happens in the next episode, or wait till you see what happens 3 seasons down the line. So yeah, that's another thing. But
Yeah. And then Dragonlance, I read that afterwards. Obviously, they were based on something Lord of the Rings, so they had to make it better.
yeah,
So
Yeah. We've actually we've talked about Dragonlance in a previous episode.
now you
yeah,
have
but we didn't.
one of the one of those rare books that when something sad happened, I actually cried. Like it was
Yeah.
rare. Like maybe 3 books in all my life. I've read a
In-
lot of books and.
In Dragonlance?
Now-
one of them was the Christopher Pike book. It was like such a scary book. But I
This
want-
Dragonlance, the
Yeah.
Dragonlance books. I'm also a big fan of Dragonlance.
Uh.
So, but how do you think it stands now? Does it still
Yeah,
stand?
it still kicks ass.
All right.
Yeah.
So then I would
But I
recommend.
feel- I don't know. I don't know why it's lost in a way. There's not.
Oh, that's got to do with licensing and marketing.
Yeah.
But I would then recommend our listeners to go at least check out one book of Dragonlance.
For
if they
sure.
can.
Yeah.
Tell us of any of a fantasy book that you read in nowadays. Some of the
now
new ones
Kick,
that have come
this,
out.
Master Saab gave me some. Edit that part out.
No problem.
Master Saab gave me these books, 3 of them. I'm enjoying them. I finished one, Rover. That was just fun adventure. Just again another halfling going around from one thing to the other, pirates and treasures and fun stuff like that.
Hmm.
What is this, Rover?
Rover.
a
It's
good
a,
book.
it's yeah.
In
It's
fact,
a,
you've, taken
Mel
it back.
Odom.
It's
Mel
okay.
Odom.
Yeah,
Mel Odom is
yeah.
the author of Rover. It's just
Yeah.
like this homage to classical fantasy.
Yeah,
with
it's
a
fun,
hobbit going there exploring and
Yeah.
and the main character is a halfling.
Yeah.
Oh,
And,
it's
fun,
and it's,
you know?
it's not the modern day gaming halfling in which they're backstabbing thieves. Like
Yeah.
an innocent child who's
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
starts encountering
I'm reading
everything.
a lot of books,
Yeah.
libraries and
so.
stuff like that.
Is this like associated with the setting, or
No, it's just
a
just
standalone?
yeah,
generic,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. It has a.
It's like a one shot,
Right.
one
Oh.
book, one shot.
He did do a
Nice.
sequel though.
Oh, he did a sequel
yeah,
to it?
yeah,
Alright.
yeah.
Pretty
Cool.
cool. But there are a lot of good fantasy books
What's the other
that are
one you
coming
read?
out.
Right now I'm reading
The Earth Dawn is another one you
Yes,
read.
I haven't
That's
finished it yet.
associated with the setting,
That
though.
one's very cool, though. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
I'm going slowly on it because it's so much fun. I don't want it to end yet.
There are quite a bit of good fantasy books
Yeah.
that are
But
out
they're all
there.
older, though. They're
Uh,
not new books.
no, there are some new.
Yeah?
If you go to this website called Goodreads, you'll find a
Oh.
lot of. But the thing with fantasy books nowadays is they're all grim. They're all
Yeah, I
gritty.
figured, yeah.
They're all politics. The
Yeah.
kingdom is falling.
Right.
The emperor is hiding. The
Right.
queen is hiding. The king is hiding.
I figured.
I guess that's
much.
game. We have to thank Game of Thrones for that, right?
Ah,
Or is it
yeah,
an
yeah.
earlier tradition that?
Yeah, we have to for mainstreaming it. We have to thank Game of Thrones for
Right,
that.
right.
And the last traditional heroic fantasy book. that
Heroic
I-
fantasy, that's the term.
Yeah, book that I read was probably Shannara or
All right.
yeah. No, I
Shannara
don't
is
know.
like a
It's-
blatant rip-off of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, of course. yeah, it
I'm
is.
not a big fan of it.
I tried reading it. I could not read it.
I just found an old Grimm's Fairy Tales book
Oh,
from my childhood, and it was lying around. It's like half of it was in the sun, so half the cover is like totally faded away. So I opened up one of the book, one of the stories in it, and it was 3 pages. It was called Rosebud,
hmm.
and I was reading. I was like 3 pages, and I'll quickly read it, and it was a Disney cartoon, completely right there. It was basically Sleeping Beauty,
Yeah.
but it was totally different. It was
was
like
totally
she slept
dark.
for like 100 years, and there's all these thorny vines took over the, the castle. It was different.
I also
3 pages.
I also have the Grimm fairy tales, and I
Right.
read the original Cinderella.
All
It's
right.
so dark,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
and you
One
know,
of them wasn't a guy. There's a guy who keeps chopping up his wives, and then they
Yeah.
cover it, and then he's like, "Don't open this door," and
Yeah.
they're like, "Why?" And then she opens the door, and then there's chopped up body parts.
yeah. So I think this is like an interesting tidbit of trivia for our listeners that
Right.
all these Disney bedtime stories were actually bedtime horror stories back in the
I mean,
medieval
there were
Europe.
warnings. I mean, Little
Yeah.
Red Riding Hood was pretty horrific.
Yeah, yeah.
It was basically a warning not to go and talk to strangers
yeah.
because they're like,
Have you guys read Plato's Republic? So in that, a very interesting point where Aristotle is talking to all his students, and he's like, what's really bad? Lying is really bad. So when you're educating your young children, then you should teach them not to lie.
Yeah.
So why do we teach them fantasy fairy tales? That's all lies. Like
No
they're not
way.
there. All these stories about all these crazy things that are happening.
That's
But
interesting.
the things that's very bad for your children. And like in a very old classical English,
Yeah.
or well, rather Greek. But
I know,
translation.
but have you guys ever come across any Greek fairy tales?
Well, yeah,
Greek
I-
fairy tales.
it was religion back then.
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, classical mythology, yeah. Classical Greek mythology.
No, I'm talking about like children fairy tales, like Sleeping Beauty or
I don't know,
Cinderella.
I'm sure kids pretty much like the 12 Labors of Hercules. I mean,
It was
what's there not
probably
to like?
actual
Yeah.
part of religion, though, like how we have our stories of
Pla-
Nabi Noor
Plato and
They were religious people. Well, kind
well,
of
maybe,
yeah.
but Plato and all the whole writing on Atlantis. I mean,
Yeah.
he was a young kid when he wrote that, right?
Mm.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure those work
Is-
as
is.
well for adults
Yeah.
as they would for kids
Yeah.
as well.
I don't know. Was Plato was like mid.
This was like by 2000 BC. I mean,
BC,
older
right?
than,
Yeah. No.
Pause.
So back then, they used to worship. They had like a
Yeah.
mythology of a
Half
Greek
gods.
pantheon. That was the religion. I'm talking about bedtime stories, like when children would be going to sleep
Must be
and
something,
their
yeah.
parents would tell them some stories.
I guess you had things like Herodotus then, with his travel logs.
Mm. Wikipedia this, let's see.
Yeah.
All right.
Greek fairy tales.
Of
Ancient
fables, Greek fables.
Ancient Greek.
And think about it, man. Like in Egypt, ancient Egyptian fairy tales.
Right. So I guess well, yeah, tales for kids. I mean, fairy tales, I guess, is a term that you won't find it on that, but fables and stuff. I'm sure, yeah.
Like for
But then-
us,
But then why wouldn't look? For example, if we look at Hatem Tai, right? That's for kids and that's for everybody. It's just a great story and it's epic heroic
yeah,
tale,
but
right?
then it's not a fairy tale.
There is one.
But, okay.
I guess it's pronounced Aesop.
Oh, right, of course,
Aesop, you know Aesop.
with the talking animals.
Right, yeah. So he was
Right.
a storyteller credited with a number of fables now collectively known as Aesop's fables.
Right, right.
So yeah, he
So
was
when-
in 564 BC.
Oh,
That's when he
nice.
died. So he was born 620 BC.
And this is ancient Greek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Ancient Greek.
Yeah, so I'm sure like in every culture there must have been. We should collect them. We should do like an episode on ancient fairy
Fables.
tales and fables.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ah.
And we'll try to see the similarities between that.
Of course.
And maybe we can prove that Christopher Columbus was not the first person to reach the Americas.
And that is another podcast.
So we'd like to thank Mr. Mochi to be
Yes.
part of this episode, and
I was honored.
Mr.
Thank you.
Mochi, it was an honor to have you.
and
Thank you. It was fun.
we will hopefully invite Mr. Mochi to come and participate in an episode a couple of weeks down the line, in which we'll talk about something else.
Cool.
So have a nice week.
All right.
Sure.
Bye bye. Allah Hafiz.